everyone, it's Elizabeth J with an S.
And it's Hanging Out with Helen.
Today we are going to be talking about pie in week 4 of Annette Dionisio's baking challenge. So pie can either be sweet or savory, and today our pie is going to be a savory pie. We're going to make a quiche, but the challenge is the pie crust. So let's talk about what we need. Okay, so for this pie crust, and by the way, this pie crust comes from the mother of Elizabeth J with an S. This is her pie crust, which I know she got out of some cookbook, but it's the pie crust she's always made. I know there's lots of different pie crust recipes, but this pie crust is going to require only a few things: flour, shortening, and in this case I'm going to use butter and margarine, salt, and cold water. So the first thing I'm going to do is take this water, the spoon and the fork, and put them in the freezer. So they are going to be very cold. The main thing with pie crust is everything needs to be cold at every step. So let's get going.
So we are going to sift 3 cups of flour. And like we've said in our previous videos, this is what we use to, like this, to sift the flour, otherwise known as airing the flour. So that's one. How many do we need?
We need 3 cups plus altitude.
For every cup in Kenya, you add 2 tablespoons. So I'll add 6. So then I'll just use what my mama gave me to do this.
In America, it's a different part of the body.
Oh.
Just saying. Okay, so for the shortening, you need 14 tablespoons. And so some people like to do all butter, but I like to mix it up. I think it gives it a little bit more of a flakiness to the crust, which is something that you want, but I would never do all margarine or all Crisco or Kimbo or whatever it is that you have to use, because you want the flavor of the butter in the crust. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 7 tablespoons of margarine and 7 tablespoons of butter. Now, if you look at the butter, you will see here that it looks very different from the American butter. American butter actually comes in sticks and it has tablespoon measurements already on it. But here we don't have that. So what we have to do is we have to measure in grams how much butter we're going to use. And I need a plate. Get one of those. And so for 7 tablespoons of butter, we are going to do 99, you don't have to have it on my face, 99 grams of both butter and, it's a bit cold. You want your butter to be, this came out of the freezer, so it was quite solid. So we've let it sit out at room temperature for a while.
Did you tear the plate?
Yes, I did. I teared the plate. So this is 128. That's too much.
How much you want again?
99.
Point.
22.
Okay.
You need to be exact. Nope. Okay, that's 103. I'm going to stick with that. See what's left over. And then I'm going to measure the same amount of margarine. And let me just tear.
For someone who doesn't know what tear means, what does tear mean?
Tear means that you have something on the scale, but you want it to read 0. So you press the tear button and it makes the scale to 0, even though there's something on the scale. So it's only measuring the new things that you're adding. Okay. So there we have our full amount, or 14 tablespoons of shortening, which I am now going to cut into my flour, which has been sifted. And I'm going to use this, called a pastry blender, to blend, and we've used this before on the channel, to blend the butter into the flour. Okay, so we've put the butter in, but we forgot one thing. We forgot to put in salt. Now, lots of people like to bake with unsalted butter, but this butter had salt in it. So this recipe calls for 1.5 teaspoons of salt. But because our butter had salt already in it, what do we do?
We are going to cut the salt into half. So for 1.5, I'm just going to use 3/4 of 3/4 teaspoon of salt.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're gonna add that in. Obviously, you add that in before you put in the
Butter.
the butter, but we forgot. So anyway, it's okay. All right. So Helen is going to use the pastry blender now to blend the salt, the flour, and the butter into a nice crumbly mass. Is that right?
Yeah, it has to look like coarse.
Coarse meal.
Yes.
Okay. So basically, just take your pastry blender and break up the butter's a little bit hard for this, but it'll be fine. Like I said, everything chilled is of high importance. Now, there are people who don't have the time or don't have a pastry blender, but they do have their food processor. And I suppose that if you want to take shortcuts in your...
Which we don't.
Yeah. In your pie crust making, you can use the use your food processor. We don't have we do have a food processor, but I like making my pastry like real pastry. You know, I feel like the food processor might turn it into less of a flaky pastry than what I personally like in my pie crust. So we do this all by hand. You could do this in your food processor if you like. Okay, I know I'm sounding like a snob.
You can use whatever you have. You can use even 2 knives. You can use whatever is comfortable with you. This is comfortable with us.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've said in the past, before the pastry blender came on the scene, when my mother was making pie crust, she just used 2 knives and would do this whole entire process with 2 knives. That took a real long time. We were so thrilled with the pastry blender situation. Anyway, this pie crust is going to be, if you're making something like an apple pie and you need a top and a bottom, this recipe will allow you to have a complete pie. If you are just doing an open pie, like a quiche, like what we're going to do today, then this would be 2 pie crusts, both bottoms. And basically, after you've completed making the pie crust and it's in a nice ball, you can freeze the extra one and save it for another day. So are we finished with the...
Yep.
Okay, so this is what it looks like, crumbly.
Yeah. So what are we doing next?
So now we're going to take the water that was in the freezer and the spoon and the fork that also were in the freezer. Remember, I said everything needs to be chilled. And we're going to now make the pie crust into a nice ball. Let's remove that so it doesn't get wet. And so I use the fork to put the crumbly, coarse flour butter mixture to congeal it together with the water. Now, I don't have the number of tablespoons that are required. Usually I just do this by feel, but I'll try to count how many and tell you at the end. So I just take a spoon.
Please use a measuring tablespoon.
What? It was not in the freezer. I always use this kind of tablespoon. So just a kitchen tablespoon that you use to eat. And you just drop 1 or 2, in this case I'm going to do 2, into the flour where I've made a valley. And then with your fork, you just are mashing it together. Okay, you don't want like a pool of water. It shouldn't be overly wet, but you don't want it to be super crumbly. And then you just add more crumbs and add another wet. That's now my 3rd spoon. Stir it up. You can see that the mixture sticks together. And basically you're going to do that to the whole entire bowl. So I'm going to do that off video, tell you how many tablespoons I used, and then show you what happens next. Okay, so we have done 17 of those tablespoons, a normal eating tablespoon of ice cold water. So now you can see that the mixture is pretty much together. So now it shouldn't be too sticky, but it also shouldn't be a solid mass. I'm basically going to try to divide it into 2 pieces and form a ball. So if you're using your food processor, you just throw in your water and the blade, your plastic blade, will basically do this for you. You're not kneading the dough. This is not a kneading process. It's just a sticking together process. I'm just trying to pick up all the bits so I've not wasted any of my resources. All right, there we go. So there are my 2 balls of pie crust. Now you would roll out your pie crust, but you can't do that yet. This needs to be to chill in the refrigerator for about 20 minutes. You need it to be a bit cold, so that way it rolls out nicely. So we're only actually going to use 1 of these balls of crust. So we're going to freeze 1, and we will put the other one in the refrigerator for 20 minutes. And when we're ready to roll out, we will resume the video. So we are going with a quiche, like I said, a basic simple quiche recipe. 3 eggs, 1.5 cups of milk, some salt and pepper. We have some broccoli, some green onions, and cheese. I think it's a cup of the broccoli chopped, a cup of cheese, and 1/2 cup green onions. So we're going to just prepare that while the dough is chilling, and then we will put it all together after the pie crust is made. Okay, so here is our chilled, could be a little more chilled, but chilled ball of dough. This is my rolling cloth. That's what I use to roll. You can see there are remnants of other crusts on here. So now you just want to roll this out. in a round fashion. So this is my pie plate. I'll just show you. So I have to make sure that my crust is bigger than the pie plate so I can tuck the edge under and have a nice little crust. Okay, this countertop is a little high to be rolling pie crust, but it's where I live. So you can see the crust is a bit crumbly, but that's okay. That's what's going to make it nice and flaky when it's cooked. Okay, now this side is a bit thicker than the other side, so I'm going to try to make the crust evenly thick as I can make it. Once you have your pie crust out, the way you want to roll it is from the middle to all of the edges, and that will make sure that your crust is kept as evenly thick as possible, except perhaps the very edges. So now that's definitely big enough. Do you agree, Helen?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so now we're going to put the pie crust into the pie plate. And how do we do that? Well, take your crust and your rolling pin.
Grease the pan.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. I normally don't grease the pan, but I guess for a quiche, you grease the pan.
Because when it's baking, sometimes the liquids can penetrate, so you don't want it to stick.
So I'm just going to use this pan spray.
Lightly. Yeah.
If you don't have pan spray, just use some margarine. Yeah. Anyway, so you take your rolling pin, you put the dough on it, slide your plate, are you getting all of this? Under the dough and roll it out. Try to arrange your pie crust so it's sort of centered into the pie plate. Press it down like this. And now you can see there's quite a bit left over. So normally what I do is I take it and I tuck it under, leaving a nice thick amount of crust. Also with a quiche, you don't want to make it too low because you don't want your quiche to spill over once it is cooking in the oven. So I want to make sure, what was that? I want to make sure that the crust will not cause the quiche to spill over. Okay, basically like that. Let me fix this. All right, so here we are with our crust and our quiche ingredients. First things first, Helen.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing?
We are going to, you can pinch it with a fork, but I'm just going to use my fingers. So this is what I do to just make sure it's staying where it's supposed to do, because we don't want it to fall. So this is what I do. So you just do that.
And so you go all the way around, and it kind of gives your pie a little fancy scallop.
If you call it that way.
Yeah.
So,
All right, so now our ingredients are a cup of shredded cheddar, a cup of shredded broccoli, half a cup of green onions, also known as scallions, 3 eggs, a dash of pepper, one and a half cups of milk, and a teaspoon of salt. So that is going to be our quiche. Let us put our things in. So explain what's happening.
So you layer your things. At this point, you can put in your quiche, you can put any meat that you want, but we chose to just go with green onion and broccoli, but you chop the broccoli really good, like you see how I chopped here. This is cheddar cheese, so we are just going to put that.
But some goes on top, right?
Which top?
Of the egg? Or no?
No, the egg will make it. So
okay. So at this point, you can put anything you want in your quiche. So if you want bacon, if you want ham, if you want mushrooms, if you like whatever you like to have in your...
Sausage, chilies, don't be cheap.
Anyway, this is what we had in the refrigerator at the moment. So we're making do with a vegetarian quiche.
So
I mean, this challenge is all about the pie crust anyway. So now we put in our egg mixture.
Yeah. So when it bakes, it will make a very good crust on top because the cheese will puff up. So this is...
So this is our quiche. It's about to go in the oven for how long?
45 minutes.
45 minutes at 350?
Yes.
Okay. 45 minutes at 350. I mean, it does depend on your oven, so you might want to check it beforehand. So the house is smelling really good, right, Helen?
Yes.
Okay. So how long has it been?
50 to 60 minutes.
Okay, because our oven cooks slowly.
Yeah, it's gas oven, so cooks really slowly. But our quiche has really baked nice. Look. So you see, I told you the cheese would puff up on top.
Yeah.
And make the crust.
So we're going to let it cool for a little bit, and then we're going to try a piece.
Yes.
Okay, it is time to cut the pie, the quiche. It looks well cooked. The crust looks crispy.
The reason why we are doing this is just to show how the crust cooked. Remember, it's all about the pie crust challenge. So this is ours.
Okay, let's see the inside of the pie.
This is the inside of the pie.
I want to see the crust. Wait, let me do this side for the light. So there is the crust. No, this way. I want to see. Nicely. You can see that it's nicely crispy.
And this?
And it's nicely crusty and
Please.
oh, there's the bottom. There's the pie. And there is the quiche. The crust came out nice. You can see the layers in it. All right, time for the taste test.
Okay, guys, I'm the tester here. Oh, it's really nice.
What about the crust? That's
Whoa.
Break off a piece of the crust.
It's really good.
Ooh, yeah. That's
Guys, you see how flaky it is?
How does it taste?
Melts in your mouth, just like that. Whew.
So, the challenge is passed. Pie crust challenge complete. What's next?